My name is Claire. I'm 28 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my sister walked into the hotel where I'd worked as a housekeeper for 5 years and introduced me to her fiancé's entire family like I was part of the furniture. She looked right at me in my uniform, smiled that smile she's perfected since we were children, and said, loud enough for 12 people to hear, "Oh, don't mind her, she just cleans the rooms." Her future mother-in-law laughed politely. Her fiancé looked away, and I stood there holding a stack of fresh linens, invisible, exactly the way my family had always preferred me. I smiled, set down the linens, and said 5 words that made the hotel manager walk over in 30 seconds flat. What happened next? Let's just say my sister wasn't the only one with an announcement that evening. But before I get to that, please take a moment to like and subscribe if you enjoy these stories, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now, let me take you back to where this really started. Because it didn't start at that hotel. It started in a hospital waiting room 16 years ago when my father took my hand and said, "Claire, you're the strong one. You can handle anything." I was 12 years old. I didn't know yet that being called the strong one in my family was not a compliment. It was a job description. My parents divorced when I was 13. It wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no broken dishes, no slammed doors. My father simply packed a bag one Tuesday afternoon while my sister and I were at school, and by the time we got home, half the pictures were gone from the walls. My mother spent the next year in what she called her recovery period, which mostly meant my sister got to be sad and I got to be useful. I learned to cook that year. I learned to do laundry, to manage grocery lists, to wake my sister up for school when my mother couldn't get out of bed. My sister's name is Danielle. She is 2 years younger than me, and from the time she was small, she had a gift for being exactly what people wanted her to be. She cried beautifully. She laughed at the right moments. She said things like, "Mom, you're so strong," at exactly the right volume, in exactly the right rooms, and people believed it absolutely. I didn't resent her for that. Not then. I just noticed it. The way you notice weather. The way certain conditions make some things grow and leave others a little dry. After the divorce, money was tight in the way that changes your relationship with possibility. My mother worked part-time. We qualified for reduced lunch at school. Every year when the school supply list came out, my mother would go through it with a pen and circle only the essentials. I learned to want carefully. Danielle, somehow, never seemed to notice any of it, not because she was careless, but because my mother worked very hard to make sure she didn't have to. I understood this only later. At the time, I just thought I was unlucky. When I was 17, I got a job at a dry cleaner 2 blocks from our apartment. I worked weekends and 2 afternoons a week. I saved the money in a shoebox under my bed. My plan was college, specifically Harrington College, a small private school about 40 minutes from home that had a strong hospitality management program. I'd done the research. I knew their financial aid was generous. I'd visited the campus twice by myself on the city bus, just to walk through it and feel what it was like to want something that specifically. I got in. Full merit scholarship, conditional on maintaining a 3.5 GPA. I remember sitting in the kitchen with the letter, hands shaking, waiting for my mother to come home so I could tell her. She came in tired, set down her bags, looked at the letter. "That's wonderful, honey," she said. She hugged me. Then Danielle came in, and my mother's whole body changed, the way a plant turns toward a window. "Did you eat?" she asked my sister. "You look tired. Do you want me to make you something?" I folded the letter back into the envelope. I ate a bowl of cereal standing at the counter. I told myself it didn't matter because I had a plan and the plan was working. I started college that fall. Danielle started high school the same year, and my mother threw her a party. Streamers, a cake with her name on it, cousins and aunts, and the neighbors from downstairs. I left for my first day of college with a new backpack I'd bought myself and a granola bar in the front pocket. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because it explains what happened later when I thought I'd finally outrun all of it. The hospitality management program at Harrington was serious. I learned event coordination, hotel operations, revenue management, guest experience design. I had a professor named Dr. Reyes who told me in my second semester that I had unusual instincts for service excellence, that I understood the difference between making someone feel attended to and making someone feel genuinely seen. I wrote that down in my notebook and looked at it on the hard nights. I graduated in 4 years with a 3.8 GPA and a letter of recommendation from Dr. Tilla Reyes that she told me was the strongest she'd written in 11 years. I had applied, during my final semester, to the management training program at the Alderton Grand, one of the most respected full-service hotels in the region. 400 rooms, 3 restaurants, a ballroom that hosted events for 250 guests, the kind of place that had a waiting list for its management track. They didn't take me. Not that year. The rejection was polite and brief. I kept the email. I reapplied the following year with a stronger portfolio and the case study I'd written based on a service recovery situation I'd handled as a front desk supervisor at the smaller hotel where I'd been working since graduation. That hotel, the Crestview, was where I spent 5 years learning everything the program hadn't taught me: how to de-escalate a guest who'd been given the wrong room type on their anniversary, how to coordinate a last-minute memorial reception when the original venue fell through, how to hold a team together during a staffing crisis the week of a sold-out conference. The Crestview was not glamorous. The carpets in the hallway were a shade of burgundy that had been fashionable in 1994. The elevators sometimes took 3 minutes to arrive. But I loved that building the way you love something you've earned, and the guests knew it. My reviews were the kind that get framed in break rooms. I was promoted to housekeeping supervisor, then guest services supervisor, then assistant operations manager. I was, in my quiet way, building something. My family didn't see any of it because I was still just the one who worked at a hotel. Danielle had gone to state school on a partial scholarship and come out with a degree in communications, and a boyfriend named Patrick who wore the right clothes and had the right last name and whose family owned property in 3 different states. My mother loved Patrick immediately, the way she loved anything that suggested elevation. They got engaged 9 months ago, and the wedding planning began with an energy I had never seen applied to anything involving me. The venue they chose was the Alderton Grand. I found this out not from my sister, not from my mother, but from an email I received at work 2 months ago, because by that point, everything had changed. I need to back up. 6 weeks before the rehearsal dinner, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. The area code was local. I almost didn't answer. The voice on the other end introduced herself as the Director of Operations at the Alderton Grand. Her name was Ms. Whitfield. She said she had been given my name by 2 different sources: Dr. Bertat Reyes, who was apparently on the Alderton's advisory board, and the general manager of the Crestview, who she said had described me in terms she didn't use lightly. She was calling, she said, because they were looking for a director of guest experience, a newly created role, senior management level, designed to unify their service culture across all 3 properties. Was I interested in having a conversation? I sat down on the edge of my bathtub because it was the closest flat surface. I said yes. We talked for 40 minutes. She laughed twice. I did not cry until after we hung up. The formal interview was 3 weeks later. I wore a blazer I'd owned for 4 years and had dry cleaned twice, specifically for occasions that hadn't come yet. There were 4 rounds of interviews over 2 weeks, a panel presentation, a written case study, a tour of the property with the general manager, who asked me questions about room flow and service recovery, and what I thought distinguished a memorable guest experience from a merely satisfactory one. I got the offer on a Thursday morning. I was standing in the Crestview break room when my phone rang. I stepped into the supply closet, the one that smelled like industrial cleaner and rubber gloves, and listened to Ms. Whitfield tell me the number and the title and the start date. I said very professionally, "Thank you so much. I'll review the details and get back to you by end of day." Then I hung up and pressed my face into a stack of clean towels and did not make a sound. The start date was the Monday after the Alderton Grand's biggest event of the spring season. The event was Danielle's wedding. I want to be careful about how I describe what I felt when I realized this, because it wasn't revenge. It wasn't even satisfaction. Not exactly. It was something quieter. It was the feeling of a door you've been knocking on for years, finally swinging open. And the light coming through it turns out to illuminate everything behind you too. I accepted the offer. I gave my notice at the Crestview. I bought a second blazer. And I waited. My mother called me the week before the wedding to discuss logistics. Her voice had that particular tone it used when she was managing me, efficient, slightly impatient, like a project manager who already knows you're going to underperform. "You'll be helping with setup on Friday," she said. "The hotel will need someone to coordinate with the florist. You know how these things work, right? With your job and everything." I said yes, I knew how these things worked. She paused, then added, "Try to look nice, Claire. It's a big weekend for Danielle." I thanked her and said I'd do my best. On Friday evening, I arrived at the Alderton Grand 30 minutes before the rehearsal dinner was scheduled to begin. I was not, technically, working. I was a guest. I was wearing a green dress I'd had for 2 years, and had never worn because I'd been saving it without quite knowing why. My hair was done. I had earrings on. I thought, exactly like a person who belonged in a room like this. The lobby of the Alderton Grand is the kind of space that makes you breathe differently when you walk into it. High ceilings, warm light, marble floors with an undertone of gold. I had been in this lobby before. Twice during my interviews and once when I was 22 and had walked in just to use the restroom and feel the carpet under my feet. That time, a bellman had looked at me for a second too long before deciding to let it go. Tonight, the front desk staff smiled when I walked in. One of them recognized me from my orientation visit earlier that week. I was making my way toward the Elmwood room, where the rehearsal dinner was being held, when I heard my sister's voice. She was in the corridor near the entrance, standing with Patrick and his parents and 3 other people I recognized as aunts from his side. She was telling them something. Animated, her hands moving the way they always did when she was performing Happiness. Then she turned and saw me coming down the hall. For a moment, she looked almost glad. Then something shifted in her expression. That small recalculation I had seen my whole life, and she turned back to the group. "Oh," she said, "that's my sister." Her tone was warm but light, the way you'd introduce a side character. "She works here at the hotel. Isn't that convenient?" She laughed. Patrick laughed. His mother said, "How sweet." I had stopped walking. I was about 10 feet away, holding my small clutch, standing on the marble floor in my green dress. Danielle smiled at me, the particular smile that meant she was still performing. "She keeps the place running," she added, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "We'd be lost without the staff." She said it with affection, the way people say things that are unkind with just enough warmth that you can't quite object without seeming oversensitive. Patrick's mother looked at me with the polite blankness reserved for people who have been categorized. I looked at my sister. I looked at the corridor. I thought about the supply closet at the Crestview, and the stack of towels I'd pressed my face into, and the number Ms. Whitfield had said over the phone. I thought about my green dress and why I'd been saving it. I smiled. Not the reflex smile I'd been practicing since I was 12. A different one, the kind that means you know exactly where you're standing. "Actually," I said, "I should probably clarify something." Danielle's smile held in place, though I could see the edges of it tighten. I turned slightly, including the group in what I was about to say. "I don't work here exactly. Not yet. I start Monday. I accepted the position of Director of Guest Experience 2 weeks ago." Silence. Patrick's father, who had been checking his phone, looked up. I continued, keeping my voice easy, conversational. "This is actually the venue I've been brought in to oversee, so I thought I should come tonight and make sure everything looks right." I glanced around the corridor, professionally, the way I'd watched Ms. Whitfield do during our tour. "And it does. The team here is excellent." One of Patrick's aunts said, "Director of... at the Alderton Grand?" "Yes, ma'am." I nodded. I stepped forward and extended my hand to Patrick's mother, who took it. "It's a wonderful property. Your son and my sister chose really well. Patrick's mother's entire posture changed. We had no idea, she said. She looked at Danielle. You didn't tell us your sister was in hotel management. Danielle opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I excused myself pleasantly and walked toward the Elmwood room, where the rehearsal dinner was beginning, and I heard Patrick's father say behind me, "That's impressive. The Alderton Group doesn't promote from outside lightly." I want to pause here and say something, because if you've ever been the one in your family who got treated like background noise, while someone else got to be the story, I want you to know it doesn't always get announced. Sometimes it just becomes quietly, unmistakably true. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had a moment where the truth came out without you even having to fight for it? If you're enjoying this, hit the like button. It genuinely helps. Now let me tell you what happened at the dinner, because it wasn't over. The Elmwood room was everything a rehearsal dinner should be. Round tables with linen cloths, low floral centerpieces, candles and glass votives. About 40 guests, dressed well, talking the way people talk when they're in beautiful spaces and know it. I found my seat, which was, predictably, at the far end of the room near the door to the service corridor. The seat beside me was empty. My mother arrived 12 minutes later. She came in on the arm of my Aunt Patricia, scanning the room the way she always did, measuring its quality against some internal standard. When she found my table and saw me sitting there alone, she made her way over with the expression she used for minor disappointments. "You look nice," she said, and I could tell this surprised her. "Thank you, Mom." She sat down, glanced around, patted my hand in the distracted way she'd always patted things that required acknowledgement, but not attention. "This is beautiful, isn't it? Danielle did so well." She looked across the room to where my sister was standing with Patrick, receiving compliments, radiant in the way she'd always been radiant when an audience was assembled. "She did," I said. My mother looked at me then, a real look. "Are you all right? You seem—" She paused, settled, more than usual. I told her I was fine. I said I had some news, but that it could wait until after the wedding, that tonight was for Danielle. She nodded, already looking away. Later, during the welcome remarks, Patrick's father stood and toasted the couple, and toward the end he said something I don't think he meant to say quite so publicly. He said, "We're all so grateful to have learned more tonight about Claire, Danielle's sister, who we now understand will be running this very hotel. Quite a family of talented women." He raised his glass toward me. 40 people looked at me. I raised my water glass. My mother turned her head slowly in my direction. I watched her face move through something I had never seen on it before. Not surprise exactly. More like the experience of a room you thought you knew turning out to have a door you hadn't noticed. "Running the hotel," she said quietly, just to me. "Director of Guest Experience," I said. "I start Monday." She set down her fork. She picked it up again. "When did this happen?" "A few weeks ago." "Why didn't you tell me?" I thought about that question for a moment. I thought about the letter in the kitchen when I was 17, and the cereal bowl and the granola bar in the backpack. I thought about "try to look nice, Claire." I thought about "don't mind her, she just cleans the rooms." "I'm telling you now," I said. She looked at her plate. When she looked up, something in her face was different. Smaller, in the way that some things look smaller when you finally see them clearly. "I didn't know," she said. "About the degree. About any of this, really. I didn't ask enough. I didn't say anything to that. Sometimes silence is the truest answer." Danielle found me near the end of the evening, when the dinner had shifted into dessert and conversation and the loosened ease of a party that had gone well. She came up beside me at the edge of the room, near a window that looked out over the hotel's courtyard garden. And for a moment, we just stood there. "Patrick's mom asked me 3 times tonight if I'd always known you were going to run a hotel," she said finally. "What did you tell her?" She was quiet. I said, "Of course." I said, "I always knew you were going to do something like this." She paused. "I know that's not really true." I looked at my sister. She was 26 years old and still had the same quality of light she'd always had, that ease, that warmth that came to her naturally. It wasn't a performance, or not entirely. It was just who she was, and I had never hated her for it. Not truly. "Why did you say that about me?" I asked. "In the hallway. She just cleans the rooms." Danielle looked at her hands. "I don't know," she said. Then, "I think I didn't want them to ask questions. About the family. About—" She stopped. "It was easier to make you small than to explain things." It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the surge of righteous anger I might have expected. I just felt tired and also, quietly, free. "Danielle," I said, "I want your wedding to be beautiful. I genuinely do. And I'm good at what I do, so if you need anything while you're here this weekend, tell whoever's at the front desk and they'll find me." I paused. "But I need you to know that the way you introduced me tonight is not something I'm going to let pass without naming it. You made me invisible on purpose, in a room full of your future family, and I need you to sit with that." She nodded. Her eyes were wet. "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said. "But I'm done making myself smaller so the picture looks better." I excused myself and went to find a glass of water. The wedding the following day was genuinely lovely. Danielle was radiant in the way brides are when everything they've planned comes together. Patrick looked at her like she was the answer to a question he hadn't known he was asking. The ceremony was in the Alderton's garden terrace, and the late afternoon light came through the trees at the exact angle that makes people feel something they can't name, but will remember. I sat near the back, on the bride's side, and watched my sister get married, and I was glad for her. I was. Some feelings don't require conflict to coexist. I was glad for her. And I was also, for the first time in a long time, equally glad for myself. Monday morning, I walked into the Alderton Grand at 7:45. I wore the second blazer, the one I'd bought after the offer. My name badge read Claire Hendricks, Director of Guest Experience. It was smaller than I'd imagined, the badge. Just my name and my title in clean dark letters. But when I put it on in the locker room mirror, my hands were steady. Ms. Whitfield met me at the top of the hour. She took me through the morning operations meeting, introduced me to the department heads, walked me through the service logs from the weekend. The wedding, she noted, had received preliminary satisfaction ratings in the 94th percentile. She said the team had performed exceptionally. I made a note to send a written commendation to each of them by end of day. My office had a window that faced the courtyard garden. I sat at the desk and looked at the trees that had framed my sister's ceremony the day before. I thought about Dr. Reyes and her 11-year record of recommendations. I thought about the supply closet and the towels and the number on the phone. I thought about my mother saying I didn't ask enough. Those 3 words, in that order, which was not an apology but was also not nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Danielle. "Thank you for everything this weekend. I know I didn't say it right on Friday. I'm working on it. Congratulations on the job. I mean that." I looked at the text for a moment. Then I wrote back, "Your wedding was beautiful. I'm proud of you. Let's talk soon." 3 weeks after I started, I received the first guest satisfaction report under my leadership. Our service scores had moved 4 percentage points in the right direction. Miss Whitfield forwarded it to the ownership group with a note that included my name. My mother called that same evening. Not to ask about the report, just to call. We talked for 22 minutes, which was longer than we talked in years. She asked what my favorite part of the new job was. I told her it was the moments when a guest arrives tired and anxious and leaves feeling like someone had actually looked at them. She said that sounded like me. She meant it as a compliment. I took it as one. I don't know what my family will look like in 5 years. I don't know if my mother will keep calling, or if the habit will fade back into Christmas cards and obligatory texts. I don't know if Danielle and I will build something real, or if we'll stay in the cordial distance that families sometimes settle into. I can't know those things. What I can tell you is that I am not waiting for permission to take up space anymore. There is a version of this story where I stayed quiet in that hallway, Where I let she just cleans the rooms wash over me the way I'd let 1,000 small diminishments wash over me before it. Where I smiled and nodded and kept moving and told myself it didn't matter. I lived that version for a long time. I know its address. I know its carpet color. I know how the elevator takes 3 minutes to arrive. But I also know what it feels like to walk into a room and have your name on the door. If you're still here, if you've made it this far, I want to say something directly to you. Maybe you're the one in your family who learned early that your job was to be useful, not celebrated. Maybe you've been making yourself smaller for so long you've forgotten what your full size actually looks like. Maybe someone has told you recently, or not so recently, don't mind her. She just cleans the rooms. I want you to hear this. The rooms you clean, the tables you serve, the files you manage, the emails you send at 10 p.m. when no one's watching, none of that is invisible. It is architecture. You are building something. Even when no one is naming it, being called the strong one is not the same as being cared for. And the truth has a way of coming out, not always dramatically, not always in a hotel corridor with 40 people watching. But it comes. It always comes. You don't have to announce yourself. You just have to keep going. And know that going is enough, until suddenly it's more than enough, and the door opens, and the light comes through, and everything you built in the quiet is standing right there. Solid. Yours. I'm Claire Hendricks, Director of Guest Experience at the Alderton Grand. I start every morning at 7:45, and I am not background noise. If this story reached you, drop a comment and tell me one thing you're building right now that no one else can see yet. I'd love to read every single one. Like and subscribe if you want more stories like this. There's one in the description that I think you'll feel even more. Take care of yourself. You've got this.